Are you a solopreneur looking to 2 times your revenue to fund your lifestyle and give back? Well, this podcast is for you. We bring you inspirational guests sharing actionable tips to solve many of the struggles you face each and every day. And now over to your host, Paul Higgins.
Hello to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you're a first-time listener, welcome. And if you enjoy it, please subscribe. If you're a regular, thanks for your support. Love to get your feedback at paul@buildlivegive.com. It means the world to me when you do. Our guest today is someone who started as an engineer and created great products that marketers were not doing justice to. So they decided to go and study marketing and work out how to improve that. Then they were acquiring small businesses for a larger company, and they realized that the key reason why selling was because, or the reason people were selling was because of them hitting a growth ceiling. They just didn't know how to step up out of the day-to-day running of the business. So you can see a pattern here, right? This guest loves solving problems. So this guest then jumped into it full-time, so helping these owners work on the business rather than in the business. He works with creative agencies now and shares his valuable lessons no matter what size of business you run. And I'll emphasize the word business, not a job. So why listen? How to get out of the service delivery in your business, what key metrics to track, and an absolute masterclass on who to hire and how. They've also kindly given access to an amazing hiring process, which they mention in the show. So over now to Brad Farris from Anchor Advisors. Welcome, Brad Farris from Anchor Advisors to the Build, Live, Give It show. Brilliant having you on here today, Brad.
It's great to be here. Thanks so much, Paul.
Yeah, well, look, you're an amazing member of our community BLG collective.
And thank you.
Yeah, it's just so great to have you on because I know you're doing a lot of value for people and I'm sure that you're going to share a lot of value for everyone listening right now. So what I always love to kick off with is something that your family or friends know about you that we wouldn't.
Well, probably the thing that they would know is that over the last few years especially, I've really been invested in American football and fantasy football especially. I've always been a football fan and grew up in the Bay Area, so I'm a 49ers fan. And then a few years ago got into fantasy football. And, you know, the fun thing about fantasy is it's not so much about the football as it is about the friends that you play with. And
it's the rivalry. Right?
It is, right. It's the pride. And there's a group I've been playing with for about a decade that I've become really quite good friends with, and so that's been great.
Great. And, you know, not to put too much pressure on you, but where do you normally finish in the ladder?
Oh, man. So we have a jersey that we buy for the winners, and I do have 2 winners' jerseys, but not in the last few years.
That's right. So we're tracking about 20% success rate.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
Yeah. And so, you know, is there any talk about when the game will return?
I can't imagine. I mean, everyone's talking about even baseball returning, but I have a hard time believing that we're going to have a lot of football this year.
Yeah, well, look, our version, Australian Football League, we're potentially starting next month.
Wow, that's it with no fans? Is that
correct.
How you're planning?
Yeah. Closed doors, but they're all getting tested today by tomorrow, actually. Everyone on the list, so to speak.
Yep.
And if, you know, then if everyone's clear, well, then they'll go to the next stage. Yeah, I must admit, I'm not a huge football fan because because my team's always down the bottom. We've won the most premierships ever, but unfortunately they were mainly before I was born. So it just hasn't really worked. But yeah, we've got our version of fantasy footy and they love it. And to the point where, you know, if we go on a golf day or a golf trip, you know, that's all they'll talk about, summer or winter.
Yes. Well, here, I'm sure that it's true where you are, too, that people play fantasy golf also. They draft for each tournament, and then depending on how much money the person wins across the season, then that ranks the managers in their standings.
Oh, I definitely have to get onto that one because I love watching the PGA. So, yeah, excellent. As long as we're doing that based off other golfers and not myself.
That's correct.
I'd be fine with that one. So, look, I know you started in, I'll call it home services, and you can sort of describe in more detail what that is. And then, you've been running this successful consulting business now for almost 20 years. But just take us through a little bit of a journey of, working for someone and then transitioning to work for yourself.
So I started my career as an engineer and eventually got frustrated that I could design the perfect product, the product that the marketing person told me that was going to sell, and then it doesn't sell. And so the way engineers think about it is, well, that's a problem to be solved. And obviously the marketing guy doesn't know what he's doing, so I need to learn about marketing. And so went on a journey to learn about marketing, and in that process realized I needed to understand accounting, to understand how the scoreboard worked, and eventually became sort of the nerd that spoke business, or the business guy that spoke nerd, depending on which side of the table you're on.
Yes.
And the company I was working for at the time went on an acquisition campaign where they were buying small businesses. They needed someone to evaluate technology, and since I also spoke a language they understood, they brought me along. And so for about half of the 10 years that I worked in corporate, I was working on buying entrepreneur-led businesses. And there's nothing that teaches you what people care about in business than trying to evaluate buying a business, because you understand what people value and what they don't value. And we bought a bunch of businesses, and what I came to realize was a lot of entrepreneurs were selling businesses because they didn't know how to grow their business to the next level. They had grown the business as far as they could with their own knowledge and understanding, but to get further, they needed someone else's help. They ended up selling to us, which was great for us because we knew what to do to grow that business. But the entrepreneur, although they got a big check, oftentimes they weren't really happy about the transition. You know, as one guy told me, I went from being in charge of 200 people to being in charge of my dishwasher. You know, it's just not as fulfilling necessarily as they thought it was going to be. And so, so that in 2001, I decided to switch sides of the table and come over to work for the entrepreneurs, helping them to get past those barriers that they've seen to growth. And as you said, I've been doing that for 20 years and had different service offerings or different ways that I delivered that to entrepreneurs. And about 2 years ago, have really focused down on just these people who are crossing the $1 million threshold. That once a business gets to be about $1 million, it gets beyond what the business owner can carry around in their head anymore. And they really need to start to build that middle management team. And they need to act differently and do different things in order to grow their business to that $3 to $5 million level. And so that's really where I'm helping people, by bringing together small business owners past that $1 million business level, so that they can learn from one another and grow their business more quickly.
Brilliant. And look, I know we're going back, 20 odd years here to this question, but, was it easier or harder when you jumped sides?
Oh, man. I remember sitting in my attic office thinking, oh, my gosh, technology has made it so much easier to start a business, because I designed my own business card and put a website. And this is in 2001. Now it's so much easier than it was then. But I think the things that are easy, or that technology makes easy, were never that hard when I reflect back on it. What's really hard is figuring out what value you add to your clients and how to get them, how to talk about that in a way that they can hear it and buy it. And that did take me a long time. I took several training courses to help me to reorient my language and my thought process toward that customer service type of thinking.
Yeah, and you talk about training courses. Who else has sort of supported you along the journey, especially from, how to run your own business?
Early on, my father, who was also a consultant, was really helpful for me. And there have been several mentors that I've had along the way. Some people that I would sit down with week after week. I've had coaches, and I've also had kind of peer mentors. And then there have also just been industry luminaries, people that I've never met, but who, I read their books and I went to their webinars, and some of them I was lucky enough to send questions to over email who helped me out. So there's just been a ton of people along the way, but probably my dad was the biggest one in the early days. What
we'll do now is go into the build section. We sort of already talked, or you've spoken about who you love to help, but just when someone comes up to you, particularly on LinkedIn, if someone approaches you, how do you say what you do?
So it's funny because I mostly talk about them. So if you own a business, and particularly if it's a creative service business, there are certain challenges that you're going to recognize, that your time, you as a person, you're the bottleneck to your business's growth, that you're trying to do too many things and you're not doing any of them very well. And when you started out, you thought that when you got to $1 million in sales, you would be making a lot more money than you're making today, right? And so those are all things I can help with. I can help you to get out of that bottleneck place, to build the team that you need. And in the process, even though you're spending more money on salary, you're going to raise your prices. You're going to work for people who value you more so that you can make more money and have more free time.
And, with the creative agencies, what led to that, to the narrowing down to that niche?
Well, it's funny. I didn't start out with that niche, but I did luck out that like 4 out of my first 6 clients were these creative agencies. And once I got inside with them and started working on them, I was like, this is a really great business. There's no inventory. There's no capital expenditure to speak of. If you can get more clients, you just hire more people and your business grows. And so it's a very simplified kind of problem. And then the other thing that I saw was that many of the creative entrepreneurs, they recognized that they didn't know everything they needed to know about business. And so they were willing to take advice in a way that some of my other clients weren't. And so it just, over time, I thought, these are the people I want to work with. They're the ones that I'm having the most fun with, and they're the ones that I'm getting the most results with. And so I just have, over the time, slowly narrowed down to those people.
Yeah, and I think it's so important to do that. And whether it's a niche, I know, different parts of the world say it differently, but I think it's really important, certainly from a LinkedIn perspective as well. A confused buyer never buys. And I think if I look at your profile, it's very clear on who you help. And I think that makes a great difference. And as far as, this bottleneck, right? So you've worked with a lot of these agency owners. What are the couple of the key things you see that make the difference between going from the operator to the purely the owner?
So the most important indicator to me that a business is going to grow is if the business owner has taken themselves out of the service delivery. Like, as long as the business owner is part of delivering services to the clients, that business is stuck, because the business owner themselves, essentially, they've hired people to help them deliver services. They aren't in the business of growing a business. And in order to be in the business of growing a business, your job becomes hiring people to deliver the service, not delivering the service yourself. There's a big mindset shift that happens. That's one of those big, kind of switches that has to flip in order for people to get into growing their business.
Yeah, and what are some of the things that people find the hardest to let go of in that transition?
Well, it's funny. I think this happens for every business owner, regardless of your niche. But there's a couple of things about being in the service delivery part that are great. Like, at the end of the day, you can look back and say, see, I did that and I got paid for it, right? Like, there's very direct feedback to delivering service that feels really great. Also, if you have a technical skill, if you're a designer or you do web design or you do digital marketing, all of those fields are changing very rapidly. And so if you pull yourself out of the service delivery, there's this fear that I'm going to lose my edge. I'm not going to know what, I need to do anymore. And I can't go back. I couldn't go back and get a job because now I've separated myself from the nitty gritty and the technical details. And both of those things are true. And you have to kind of decide, I'm going to let that go. Because when you're the manager, you get to the end of the day and you look around and you say, oh, look, everybody else got things done, right? My job is to create the environment, the situation where other people can be productive. And that's a different kind of satisfaction versus, at the end of the day, look at what I did.
Yeah, look, and, for me personally, it's been around sales. I love selling. And to me, my version of selling is, finding out where someone is, find out where they want to be, and help them get there. And I just love that. So I'm starting to let that go because, like you've identified, even if you're under $1 million, there's a lot of coaches and consultants. I know you're listening now. That's the key thing. You've got to let go sometimes of the things that you absolutely love. And, you've talked about, for the $1 million plus, etc. What are some of the key hires? Like, what are some of the first hires is there a pattern to that, or is it custom every time you go into an agency?
It's not fully custom, but there are some patterns. I mean, what I find is that there are business owners for whom sales is the thing that they're really good at. And even if they're still delivering services, they love to sell. They can see that selling is something that's working for them. And so for those people, it's about getting someone into that services role so that they can dedicate more time to selling. For others, if they aren't good at sales, then we need to bring someone on who can help them with that right away. The business owner is always going to be the best salesperson because you have credibility that nobody else has. If you say something's going to be that way, it's going to be that way, and the client knows it, right? Versus a salesperson who they always think is lying to them. But having someone who can set some things up, who can do some prospecting for you so that you're doing more of the knocking things down, that can be really helpful. But the role that I love when my business owners get to is when they can hire a really good financial person. Like that changes people's lives when there's someone else that's worrying about the finances, when the business owner isn't the one who's entering things in QuickBooks and making sure the cash flow is there. To have a really good finance person is another role that really helps to grow a business.
Yeah, and on the finance, is that a person within the business, or is it a contractor or an expert they contract in? What model normally works best?
For my clients, until they get to the very sort of end of my time working with them, they probably can't afford that full-time finance person. But right away, if I can get them to have a bookkeeper so that the business owner isn't entering in transactions, and even a fairly simple bookkeeper will at least tell you, hey, your cash flow is getting tight. You need to do some things. Like they'll give you some direction so that you don't feel like you're the only one worrying about it. And so I have some virtual bookkeepers that I've recommended to clients. And, really for a few $100s a month, you can take all that stuff off your plate and really release a lot of energy toward growing your business.
Yeah, once you've got the numbers in a much better place, because I completely agree with getting a bookkeeper, what are some of the key numbers that you look at in a creative agency, that helps you know whether the strategy you're both implementing is on track?
The first number I always look at is total payroll divided by total sales. Most creative agencies are spending around half of their total sales on payroll. And that's okay. 45% is really kind of my target. I want them to spend about 45% of total sales on payroll. But sometimes it's 55, 60%. And you're just never going to have enough margin to hire the people you need when you're spending that much on your creative payroll.
And sorry, Brad, just on that, what are some of the best ways to reduce that percentage?
Well, for most people, the reason that's so high is that every department is one person and they're underutilized. And so the way out of that typically is to grow sales. Sometimes you can make some of those, you can use more outsourced resources. So like if you look at it and your web designer is really underutilized, maybe you can do that on an outsourced basis. And so there are some ways to make your labor a little bit more flexible, especially because today we need such a wide range of things. But usually that's about growing the sales to get out of that. You mentioned it earlier, the best way to grow those sales is to start to specialize. Creative people love to solve new problems. But the way you make money in business is to solve the same problem over and over again, right? To have systems and processes and things that are repeatable and predictable. And so by narrowing down the number of problems that you solve, sometimes that can solve that staffing issue also.
Great. So that's number one, total payroll divided by sales. What's another key metric you look at?
So then the next key metric I look at is their pipeline. I see a lot of creative service firms that are sort of porpoising, where they spend a lot of time on sales, they fill their pipeline, and then they close some things, and then they spend a lot of time delivering and they're not selling. And then all of a sudden they run out of pipeline and then they get back into selling again. And instead, it's extremely important if you're going to grow that you're making consistent business development efforts week after week. And so do you have a solid pipeline? Are you paying attention to it? Are you adding things to the top of the funnel every week? If you're not adding things on a weekly basis, that's when you start to see the pipeline start to drain and you get desperate, and then you make bad choices about what clients to be selected.
Yeah, and within the creative agency industry, what are some of the best ways to drive traffic to fill the top of the funnel?
There's two pipelines that I want to see in every business. One is a business development pipeline where you're doing outreach. And the other is your organic pipeline. So once you get in with a client, you need to be able to expand your offerings and continue to offer more value to that client over time. And so most people are good at that second one. Most people are good at getting in and kind of continuing to sell their value along the way. But the business development pipeline, that's where I think most people are falling down. And they need to be either doing a lot of speaking and writing. So if you're in a niche, you can find the industry group or the association or whatever and start to deliver a lot of content into that industry, or just do outreach. Just figure out who it is that are your ideal clients and go after them. And again, whether that's LinkedIn, whether it's picking up the phone, whether it's networking your way in there, but having some sort of consistent method that you're reaching out to new prospects.
Yeah, and I know you're in the BLG collective, as I mentioned at the start, which is great. What have been some of the key lessons you've learned about doing outreach on LinkedIn?
So switching from a face-to-face sales, which 2 years ago I did almost all of my sales face-to-face, networking, meeting people, speaking, like I was talking about, sort of the industry focus. When you move to online sales, two things are important. One is you have to be much more clear about what you do. When you're selling face-to-face, it's easy for you to kind of reposition yourself depending on who you're talking to, right? So you keep a broad positioning on your website because you're narrowing it to whoever you're speaking to. But that doesn't work online. Online, you're competing against the whole world, right? And so if you have that squishy positioning on your website, people come by and they're like, I don't get it. So you really have to narrow it down. And then once you've narrowed it down, the sales process online is much slower than it is face-to-face. We have a lot less information when we're talking to people online, right? And so it's harder to build trust. It's harder for people to get to know you. And so learning how to slow that process down, going from, when I sold face-to-face, I could do a one-call close. I could sit down in someone's office, talk to them about their needs, and at the end of it say, okay, should we move forward? Online, that's at least 2 conversations. It might be 3, right? And there's a lot more of that cocktail party talk online where you're chatting with people, you're engaging in their content, you're being social, right? The social part of social media in order to become known so that when you have that sales conversation, you're further down the trust curve.
Yeah, and I think it is a real skill. And I know in one of our sessions the other day, I had a client come back and compliment me for the way that I handled it versus others. And, I'm sure everyone listening has had, and probably today will get multiple messages, connection request and then bombarded with a sales message, which is just a generic one, not custom to you. And I think, as Brad said, there's so many different touch points, and I call it the hot potato. And the hot potato, as soon as you get the potato, you want to pass it on to someone else, right? Because you're going to get burnt. So, there's a lot of open questions, and there's a lot of, short open questions to do those touch points. So I totally agree. And it's what you do in person, right? But you just know that the response isn't immediate. So you do have to be a little more patient. Yeah, I think there is a real art to it. And if you're unsure on how to do that, certainly reach out, because, as a group, we've perfected that really well. Now, the last question in the build section I want to ask you is just about hiring people, right? So,
yes.
You constantly help people hire to get out of this, in the business rather than on the business.
Yes.
So what are the couple of key tips you've got when hiring someone? How do you find great skill and talent?
So when you're short on people, whether it's because you've created a new position or someone's quit, most of the business owners that I work with want to fill that role as quickly as possible, right? Having that person missing from their team is a pain point. It's like having a rock in your shoe. But doing a good hiring process takes time. And if you do a good hiring process and this person works with you for a couple of years, you're going to spend more time with this person probably than you're spending with your spouse. And so helping people to slow down and really do a good, thorough hiring process is something that I'm constantly battling. So what is a good, thorough hiring process? Well, it's not calling up a couple of friends and saying, hey, you're good at PowerPoint. Can you be my marketing manager? Right? That's the shortcut. But the right way to do it is to really think through, what do I need in this role? What would it take to be successful in this role? What would my ideal candidate look like? Write up a real job description for the role so that you can really think through, what are the skills this person needs? And then reflect those into a job posting. A job posting is not a job description. It's an advertisement that's trying to attract that ideal candidate. Then once you get that posted, hopefully you'll get 40 or 50 resumes. Going through resumes is a nightmare. I want to kill myself every time I see a pile of resumes. And so I have people answer a questionnaire as part of their application. And so I don't even look at resumes unless their answers to the question kind of clue me in that they're my ideal candidate. Once you've done that screening, then a phone screen and 2 interviews. And I make the interviews long. No one says an interview needs to be a half an hour or an hour. Make it 90 minutes. Make it 2 hours. Ask enough questions so that you really are getting to know the person. And then finally, because we have that problem that we want to solve, we're trying to look at each candidate like, oh, this person could work. No, you need to look at every candidate skeptically. Why won't this person work? What is wrong with this person? Because if you're looking skeptically, you're going to have a more well-rounded picture. A good candidate is not someone that doesn't have any flaws. It's someone that you say, yeah, there's pluses and minuses here, but I think they could do the job.
Brilliant summary. And everyone will, go to the show notes to get the detail of that, because I've written it down, but you might be driving, you might be walking at the moment. But definitely go to the show notes to get that as we transcribe all of it. So before we go into the live section, I'd like to help you build your authority on LinkedIn, and in particular do that outreach in the right way as we spoke about. So you can just go to blgclick.com and watch a pre-recorded free masterclass. You'll learn 3 secrets of getting views, the right way to get your ideal client to come to your posts. And also, as Brad said, how do you build those relationships? How do you do the hot potatoes? What scripts? What do you say? All of that's in there. So go to blgclick.com. And also, for many of the activities mentioned, it's great to have a virtual assistant to help you with. So if you don't have one and you'd love to have a VA, please just go to buildlivegive.com/VA. And we've got lots of providers that we can point you to. So the next section's the live section. So what are some of the daily habits that help you be successful, Brad?
Exercise of some kind is very important to me on a daily basis to get my head right. Both exercise and time alone in silence. So both of those things are kind of morning routines that I use to clear things out, to give myself some space, some margin, and to take care of my body so that my body can support the work that I'm doing. If I'm sick, if I'm not strong, if I don't have energy, then I'm not going to show up well working.
Yeah, I love that. And, a good friend of mine talks about a healthy business owner means a healthy business.
Yes.
I think that's so true. So Anita Chaperone, a big shout out to you for giving me that great one-liner. And for you, time and silence. I really struggle with this, and I'm sure a lot of others do. How long do you do it, and what are some tips around, getting to that place?
I spend about 20 minutes in the morning and then just 4 or 5 minutes around midday. And it's honestly, Paul, it's been a journey. It's taken me a long time. But what I've found is if I can be quiet, then a lot of things come up that have been down there that are driving my actions all day long. And if I can sit quietly and be more conscious and aware of what's going on there, then they don't have to drive me. Then I can deal with them and I can write them down and decide what I want to do with them. For me, I do a little bit of scripture reading in that time, some sort of wisdom literature that is going to inspire me, that's going to keep my compass pointed to the north. And then I sit silently with whatever I read and kind of let that soak in and listen to what's going on. And then, like you, I tend to be a high energy guy. And so around midday, my watch will buzz and remind me that it's time to stop again, because I can just get so into what I'm doing. That's a little bit of a circuit breaker for me to say, this isn't life or death. I'm not in an emergency room. I can stop and check in and see what's going on with me and then go on with the rest of my day.
Yeah, I think that's great. And, for me, some days it turns out to be 2 hours in the middle of the day where I go for a bike ride. I was going for a swim. It's getting a bit cold now. I eat a good healthy meal and then I go for a nap. And, part of that nap is a 6-minute meditation that I listen to. So that's my sort of like thinking time.
Mm-hmm.
Not silence, but it's my meditation, and then a 30-minute nap. And I can't tell you the joy of starting each morning knowing that you're going to have a 30-minute nap in the middle of the day, and especially because most of my clients are in the US, I'm in Australia, so I'm normally up 5:30, 6 o'clock in the morning.
Yes, yeah.
So it's absolute gold. So look, some great tips there. Now, what have you been learning through this pandemic that you will help your clients with?
That's a really interesting question. It's been one that I've been thinking quite a lot about. I think that one of the things that's happened to me in the pandemic is that it breaks all your routines, right? So the things that I just automatically got up and did, now I have to think about and kind of make myself do it. And so being in that sort of untethered state has opened me to be a lot more innovative and to really question some things and to listen really carefully to what my clients need and want and respond to that. And so I hope that that's a process that I will keep in front of me, even as we maybe move toward whatever is coming after this. But to be more open and to be more innovative and not to get caught in ruts in the same way that I was in the past.
Brilliant. And, I hope that I've certainly found that's a reflection time, right? So this is the time to think, you know what? I was stuck in the hamster wheel. I'm just doing the same things every day and I need to step it up. And I think that's where, getting someone like yourself, Brad, in to take people, help you go to the next level. It's hard to see the label of the jar from the inside. So I think that's critical. Now, I know Karen's your partner and she's listening to this because as good partners do, they love to give us critiques on our work.
Yes.
So what would you like to say to Karen about the support she's given you through this journey?
Well, Karen and I have been married 12 years, and one of the reasons that we got together and that we stay together is that she keeps me honest. She keeps my feet on the floor. I can get very up in my head and out into the future, and she's very good about keeping me present. And during the shutdown, it's just been amazing. She's taken on all of the kind of homeschooling role and taken on more of cooking and shopping and stuff. We shared a lot more of that before the shutdown, but it has really supported me to be able to, I really jumped into the breach with a bunch of my clients who had really some significant challenges with the shutdown. And so she's been a great support to me through that.
Brilliant. Well, the next section's the give section. So what's a charity or a community that you're passionate about and why?
So right here, just a couple blocks from our house, is an organization called New Moms that supports young single moms who are having their first child and tries to make that a really positive experience for them. You know, it can be scary, it can be disorienting, it can separate them from the support system that they might have had prior to that. So they have a residential facility and also opportunities to support people in the community who are going through that transition. And so Karen and I have both supported them over the years.
Oh, excellent. And the last section is the action section, where I'll ask you some questions to get some rapid fire responses. So the first one is, what are your top 3 personal effectiveness tips?
I think my first one is commitment, that when you want to make a change, or if you want to do something differently in your business or in your personal life, it doesn't happen if you're thinking about it. It doesn't happen if you write it down on your goals. It's when you commit to it, when you decide that no matter what, I'm going to get this result. And that commitment is then drives action to support that commitment. So that's one. I think the second one would be persistence, that there are a lot of times in my life when I kept going beyond the point where it made any sense to keep going.
Yes.
Usually that's when the results came, right? When I just kept at it. Maybe I just don't know when to quit. that would be a valid feedback, but that's been effective for me. I think the third thing would be time blocking, that it comes with the commitment idea that if I'm committed to something, like for instance, to create the content that I use on LinkedIn, I block my calendar from 1 to 5 every Monday. And I write a week's worth of content in those 4 hours. And until I put that on my calendar, I was always like, well, I just can't find time to get the content. But of course, I can't find time means I didn't make time.
Excellent. And what's a piece of tech that you couldn't run your business without?
Text Expander. Text Expander is a text replacement tool. And so for all of those scripts that we use in LinkedIn, you know, inviting people and some of those opening things, I can just tap a couple of keys and it will paste it right in to wherever I am. And I really love the efficiency of that. It's a great tool.
And is it also work on your mobile or is it desktop only?
There's a keyboard that you can use in iOS that has those same text expansions in it. So there is a way to do it there. But it's not as full featured as it is on the desktop.
Okay, great. And what's your best source of new ideas?
You know, I used to travel a lot for business. And when I traveled, I would go into the magazine stand, whatever you call it, bookstore in the airport. And I would just pick random magazines like Pen Fancy, Cat Fancy, or Pen Addict, or, you know, these just weird magazines. And I would try to look at the world through the eyes of the people who are reading that magazine. And it was just something I did to entertain myself on airplanes. But it's kind of trained me I consume a really wide range of content, podcasts and YouTube and stuff. And by looking at things through those different lenses, I think it gives me different perspectives on the world.
Great. And as long as none of those magazines are in plastic, I think that's...
Yes, none of those.
That's a great art. And, you know, the last one's the big one, right? And I always leave it to the end for that reason. But what impact do you want to leave on the world?
So I believe that small businesses are fundamentally better places to work than big companies. And yeah, there's a lot of efficiencies in big companies, and I get that. But small businesses, every employee gets to see the results of their work every day. They feel the efficacy of getting stuff done. And there's a community there that you can pull together that can be really valuable and make people's work more meaningful. I want to make small businesses easier to do. I think the reason that we have difficult workplaces in small businesses is because the business owner has never been taught how to create that cohesiveness and that community. And so that's what I want to do, is I want to create sort of a playbook that makes it easier to run a small business successfully.
Excellent. Brad, it's been awesome having you on the show today. I love how committed you are. I know you practice what you preach, because your commitment to writing excellent content on LinkedIn is brilliant. So if you want to check out Brad, it's Brad, and it's Farris, but we'll have all the links of what he's mentioned, including a link to his profile. And shout out. Let him know that what you learned from this episode, he would greatly appreciate that. And the other thing Brad has kindly given us is, how we went through those steps on hiring people. I think there's some real gold in there. So what Brad's given us is, if you go to anchoradvisors.com, actually, what I'll do is I'm going to put the link because it's quite a long...
It's a long URL.
It's a well SEO'd title. Let's put it in that category. So what I'll do is, once again, put that in the show notes as well. And,
right.
Like Brad said, if you're going through this and you know that you need to change the model and you need to get people, and particularly if you're a creative agency, look up Brad. But if you... doesn't matter what you do, I think it's an awesome opportunity to make that pivot. So, Brad, as always, brilliant to talk and great to have you on the show.
Thanks so much, Paul.
Brilliant. Have a great day. Bye.
All right. Talk to you later.
I really enjoyed that interview with Brad, and Brad's a great member of our community at BLG Collective. And, he just gives so much, and he did that on this podcast. In particular, I love that, the hiring tips he gave, and I hope you did as well. So you can get all the links to the show notes at buildlivegive.com. What is your biggest takeaway from Brad? Okay, please share it with him on his socials. Just go to his LinkedIn in particular. And once again, that's Brad Farris, but it's actually spelled Farris. If you believe someone would benefit from this show, please share it with them. You can learn the 3 secrets to building your authority on LinkedIn in a free pre-recorded masterclass at blgclick.com. Please take action to build your business and lifestyle, and most importantly, stay well.
Thank you for listening to the Build, Live, Give podcast. If you like what you heard, please subscribe and leave us a review. It would mean the world to us.